Welcome back, MMA Today. I'm RJ Clifford. She's Angela Hill. Joining us now, she takes on Rose Namajunas, the co-main event in Atlanta, June 14th, UFC Flyweight, with maybe the best walkout in MMA right now. Miranda Maverick, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, guys.
You are doing good. 4-fight win streak, undefeated last year. I think you only lost one round in 3 fights of all of last year. Is something firing right now? Have you found your stroke? Like, you're just killing it right now.
Man, I felt like it was fire in the last 8 or 9 fights, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The Jasmine fight was kind of a rough one for me, had that eye injury and stuff, but she's also doing really well. I like to see it as every loss I've made has kind of shown well, you know. All the girls are in the top 5 to 7 now, so I'm pretty happy about that and trying to work my way up there as well and kind of get a couple of those back at some point.
So I would say, my opinion, and maybe you could disagree, this is the biggest opportunity of your career in a co-main event against Rose, a former champion. What are the stakes in your eyes in this fight coming up?
Man, huge. This is kind of my big walk to the top, you know. It's either make it now or don't make it at all is kind of how I see it. Obviously, I have a lot of time potentially left in the sport, but I like putting that pressure on myself and seeing it that way. And Rose for me is one of those people that is beatable. It's, you know, she has a big name, that's about it. And we've trained together a lot. We know how hard each other are to spar and everything. So I'm ready to go in there and kind of show what I can really do. Sometimes you have bad performances and sometimes good, and I want to show that this one will be a good one. My last fight against Jamie was one of those where even though I won, I was like, wow, that was a rough fight for me. So I wanted to go in there and really show my skills on this one.
You guys trained a lot together before. How long ago was that?
The week before we got the call, basically, we've been training
Oh,
together for like 2 years straight. You know, she's up here in Denver as well, and we are each other's like main sparring partners before this happened. And then we grapple a lot together as well and do a lot of wrestling classes together. So we know each other very, very well. It's not something where we've trained a couple times in our lives. You know, we were training pretty consistently.
thanks. So how does that conversation work? Do you have a conversation or do you just get the call and you say yes and then she says yes?
You know, it's kind of a weird story because if you guys recall Rose's fight in Denver, she fought Tracy Cortez. I was
Mm.
supposed to fight Tracy, but Maycee dropped out of Rose's fight. They pulled Tracy from me. I ended up getting a replacement for the second time against Tracy because she loves dropping out of fights. Um, but but when she fought Tracy, Tracy was like renegotiating with the UFC and stuff. They didn't know if she'd be saying yes. It was taking a while. And literally, we had sparred 15 minutes prior, and they called me and were like, hey, would you take a fight against Rose if we could get you in for 5-day notice? And I was like, I mean, sure, like, let's do it if you guys want to do it. And this was Pat calling me and their team. And eventually, Tracy, you know, negotiated and everything. But that was a conversation that we realistically had already had. And we kept training together and all that. And, you know, we're friends, but it's also like, this is a sport. It is what it is. I always say the only person I'd never fight is probably my own sister. And she'd probably be more than happy to fight me, you know? So when I got the call for this one, I called up Pat and Rose and I was like, hey, and they were like, don't even worry about it. We already took the fight. Like, let's just figure out our camps. And it was like, all right, I'll say yes to then. And we'll just talk to coaches and make sure we don't get in each other's way and have training partners that are kind of, you know, going to both gyms.
That's interesting. So you guys don't share coaches, you just train together a lot?
Yeah, we had like I guess you'd say a mutual gym that we'd go at to spar, and then she'd come over to Easton, which is primarily where I train for
Mm.
grappling, and then she'd come to Pound for Pound sometimes to spar and do wrestling, which is my other gym. So I stayed at Easton and Pound for Pound. She stayed up at Genesis and wherever else she's at, and we just kind of split it that way and stay out of each other's territory, so to speak.
Is it a
Okay,
little
cool.
insulting that, like, you're training partners and she said yes? Because obviously she thinks, like, okay, I've sparred with her, I've trained with her, I know I can beat her.
No, not at all, really. You know, we both had talked about it and we were like, we're in no position to say no, you know, and it's
Mhm.
like one of those things where it's like, we're going to take the fight regardless. We know this is bound to happen. You know, we had already had the conversation prior, and it was one of those things where the coaches were like, let's, you know, I mean, I guess if that's the only option. And I think for Rose, you know, mindset wise, I don't know exactly, but just from us talking, she's kind of like, I just want to have fun in this sport now and try to make it where I can in the flyweight division and just make more of a legacy for myself, you know. And I think for me, it's much more on the line as far as I'm going after it. This is my chance to reach the top like she's already been.
Talking to Miranda Maverick here on MMA Today. She's Angie, I'm RJ. So where do you have the biggest advantage over Rose?
Ground game for sure. I also have a lot more strength, like physicality than Rose. She's got the speed, you know, and I already kind of know her game plan. We won't discuss too many details, but obviously she's going to try to stay on the end and not get taken down at the end of the day. I know she's been training with a lot of high-level grapplers the last month or two. Brought in Jillian, you know, is going to train with Mo Black and them. So that's been cool to see. And I've been working a lot on my speed and a lot on my striking and a lot on my wrestling. So we'll see what happens.
So if you get this W on June 14th, there'll be 5 wins in a row, now on over a former champion, probably a UFC Hall of Famer in Rose Namajunas, right in the flyweight title picture. How do you think the flyweight picture flushes out, and where do you fit into it all?
Man, you know, it's really hard right now. There's so many moving parts in the flyweight division. I'm looking forward to seeing how the Maycee and Erin fight go this weekend. Obviously, I'd love to fight one of them again, but I doubt that'll end up happening until that ends up being like title contention, you know? There's also Jasmine again in the mix. There's Natalia Silva in the mix. There's Alexa. There's Manon. So there's a lot in the top of the flyweight division that's like all of them are ranked in the top 5 to 7, but they're all kind of right there along the same line. And I think Natalia is one of those that are going to go out there and shine and just keep winning fights as well. She just had a big win, I think, a couple weeks ago, and I think she'll keep climbing up the ladder too. So one of those names is probably going to be next up for me. So we'll just see what happens there and keep climbing. I'm hoping it would just be a couple more fights before that title might be on my mind.
Wei Li also could jump up and do a super fight. That's been bantered about as well. How do you think she does at 125?
I think she does well, but I think it's going to be similar to Rose, where it's like she definitely runs into more obstacles than she does at the strawweight division. You know, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. She is a little bit more muscular, but she's still a smaller girl, and physicality matters a lot. You know, just 10 pounds difference is huge, especially once you get somebody on the ground in some way.
Oh, you mentioned Blanchfield versus Barber, the main event coming up on Saturday at the Apex. Like you said, you fought them both. How do you think that fight goes?
I'm thinking Erin will win that fight. I think from a mentality perspective, from a training perspective, and just talent overall, I think Erin has a lot more ways to win in this fight. And I think her striking, although it might not be the crispest striking, I think that she goes forward, takes and gives, and I think she'll end up walking out with the win.
Yeah, you fought those guys one right after the other.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you took from that experience, just fighting Maycee Barber, losing a close decision, and then fighting Erin Blanchfield immediately after?
I mean, the Maycee one I'm still annoyed by. You know, I think I won that fight. I think there's no question about that. I didn't really learn something, so to speak, from that fight. I felt like I dominated it. But then the Erin fight, I learned a lot from. I'd say I learned more from that fight than I ever learned from one, especially from a mental perspective. I walked in pretty cocky. And you know, Erin hadn't shown her stuff in the UFC playground yet. And I was like, everybody talks about her grappling, but I have good grappling too. I'm fine. And I had never been taken down once in my entire life until I had that fight. I think, I mean, I guess you could count Jillian's takedown, but it was like a weird slip to the back. You know, we both suicide fell kind of thing. And when I got taken down by Erin the first time, and she just like was on top of me, and I was like, wow, I cannot get up. This sucks. And my
Yeah.
striking, I was dominating her. And I remember we got done with the first round, and I was like, oh my goodness, this might be the first round I've ever lost in my life. And my coaches were like, it is. Let's get our head on right and get back in there and win the second and third. And the second round, I went out there, did really good at the striking. She took me down again, didn't get up again. And I was just like, oh, this is terrible. And I think I just mentally went downhill from there. And we worked so much. I mean, for the last 4 years, we've worked on just nobody's going to hold me down anymore. You know, that's the whole thing. And it's like, I'm not going to be on bottom anymore. I'm not going to be held down. And I actually started working wrestling, where before it was like, I'm good at wrestling. You know, I'll just work the MMA wrestling portion. And it's like, no, we need every aspect of this to be good at this stage in the game. And so Erin, I learned a lot from, and to not underestimate opponents, that's for sure. And I think if we met again, it'd be a different outcome. But yeah, learned a lot from that one. And I really think Erin's going to get it done, especially once she gets it to the ground with Maycee.
Nice.
What's the dumbest advice someone ever gave you in the MMA business? Like, what's one piece you're just like, that's so wrong. I'm not doing that.
Oh, man, that's hard. One was take the first UFC offer, like when I was younger and they're like, you get that first offer and as somebody who's young and the whole goal is to get to the UFC, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna take it. And all the coaches, not all the coaches, but I had several coaches, all my teammates were like pushing for me to take it. And it was like a one fight contract against Antonina Shevchenko way back when on a 3-day notice. I wouldn't have made weight. I wouldn't have stayed in the UFC, all this. And I was like only 3-0 or something like that in Invicta. And yeah, so didn't listen to that. Didn't listen to it for the next 2 offers I got. And then finally had a good opportunity during COVID that was like, all right, finally a 4-fight, contract where I'm not going up to 135, which is nice. But yeah, I'd say just jumping ahead too fast, and people pushing me to do that, and my internal voice wanting to do that, but common sense ruling out, which was nice.
That's pretty brave because you never know, right? Like maybe you lose your next fight and they don't come calling again. And it's very alluring, right? Going to the UFC,
sure.
the spotlight, the pay, just the like Reebok money back then was more than most purses on the regional scene. So
Exactly.
that's
And it was
that's a high level
scary.
of maturity to say no to that.
Well, I have to credit my dad with a lot of that. My dad's always been kind of like a mental coach, I guess you'd say. And he was like, kind of, it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be, but you don't need to go in there and literally not give yourself a chance at success, And I was so young. I was like 19 when I got that offer. And then I was 20 when I got the next one. I got a couple when I was 20 and 21. It was like, I've got plenty of time. I need to be smart about this. And I eventually got in the UFC when I was 22, and I think I made the right decision to wait. The only one that I really debated doing, it was a week after I fought Pearl Gonzalez at Invicta. And it was the next weekend. And I was a little banged up and bruised up, and they offered me Maycee Chasen at 135. And I was like, oh, I'm going to take it, And it was a 4-fight contract, and I was
Yeah.
so, like, ready to take it. And everybody was like, yeah, do it, do it. And that one was really close. And I ended up saying no to it. And Shanna Young ended up stepping up and taking it. And I remember watching her fight Maycee and being like, dang, I should have taken it. But I didn't. And at the end of the day, my road to the UFC was just fine, and things work out for a reason. But yeah, it was scary saying no every time. But like I said, just have to wait until you're ready. And I wanted to have plenty of experience when I walked in there, not have a hot flame burn out in 4 fights and never be in the UFC again.
Well, it worked out well for her because now you're on a 4-fight win streak, co-main event in Atlanta, June 14th against former champion Rose Namajunas. Cannot wait to see it, and we really appreciate your time, Miranda. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.